Okay, we are on, man. We're back for Wednesday afternoon office hours. And yeah, looking forward. We have a really well, first off, there's so many things happening uh in the world. And if you're following the World Cup, I don't know, man. Is Alex out there? The I saw that that the DRC tied up Portugal right before the half, man. It was 1-1, which is pretty amazing. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, a lot of stuff happening. Turns out that the reflection pool uh, has algae in it already. It's only been a few days, so that's kind of a drag. But such is life. And anyway, things are happening. But we have a guest today. I received an email. I mean, I get a lot of email from people. One of the cool things about doing what I do is not only I get to meet a lot of students, um, but I also get to meet a lot of people who are not students and hear from people, which is pretty cool, right? Like it's really nice to engage with folks, to hear their stories, and people will often write very interesting emails, like with long emails with their stories, which is very cool, because that's what I live on, right? I mean, this is my currency, is people's stories. So the more I can listen to, the more stories I have, the better for me. But anyway, I often get books from people. In fact, this past week I've gotten 2 books. Sometimes I get a bunch of books, but I received a book from a gentleman last year, and it turns out it was the first of 3 parts. And the first book is called The Slow Death of America, okay, and the second is The Accelerating Death of America. And the subtitle is Systems Failure in a Divided Nation. The subtitle here is Autopsy of a Nation That Saw It Coming. And pretty provocative titles for sure. And The Tragic Death of America, a eulogy for a divided nation. And so when I got the first one, I didn't know what to make of it, and it turns out that the books are written, they're written in a way that's really accessible. It's clearly just jumping on to different ideas. You could make the argument that in a way they're short essays, but they're really more than essays. They're it's outlined a lot. Like, for example, here's a table of contents, and they're written like this. Hang on, let me see. I'm not going to put any of it in the chatter, but just like this, really, man, lots of bullet points, lots of just thoughts, man, just like real intense thoughts, and really fascinating. And as I was reading it, I was saying to myself, man, I don't know how, number one, I don't know how somebody came up with all of these ideas, but secondly, it was just really thoughtful, really balanced, really interesting critique from a lot of different perspectives. And I really couldn't assess where the person, Shawn is the author, where the person was coming from politically. And then I realized, they're not coming from well, politically, everything is political, right, at some level, but they're really it's just a fascinating critique in a way that I think I would do a critique. So anyway, I got the 3rd book this past week, and I started looking at it, the final one. And then Shawn emailed me, and I said, "Oh, dude, you got to come on office hours." He said, like, "Just come on and let's have a conversation," because even though I had never met him, and so I just met him about 10 minutes ago as he popped on. So Jeff, bring Shawn onto the screen if you would, and and then I just thought, hey, let's have a conversation about some of this stuff, because it's not often, I just want to have a conversation. It's cool. So Shawn, welcome.
Hello, Dr. Richards.
Yeah, just call me Sam, by the way.
Okay. Military background, it's hard to do that.
Yeah, no, I got you. I got that. Yeah. Hey, so Man, thanks for sending me the books. They've been really fun to read through. Like they're not the books that you feel like I have to read cover to cover, but I can pick them up anywhere and just like kind of. But anyway, so thanks for sending them and thanks for coming on, man.
I, that writing style was intentional. I really wanted people to come home at the end of the day when they're tired and they don't want to have to think too much, to be able to pick up the book, read a couple paragraphs, put it down, come back 3 days later, pick it up. I just I wanted the conversations to be accessible,
Yeah.
without them
Light
feeling like they
reading,
were
by the
reading a
way.
textbook. What's that?
Yeah. Light reading.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that actually is kind of light reading, in that way because you can read 3 or 4 pages and then I find myself, every page that I read, and there are lots of bullets. I love how you do the bullets, right? And like I can see how you divide ideas up in your mind. And then I think like, okay, which one would I take out? What would I add in? This kind of thing. So it allows for a lot of reflective reading.
Yeah. And that was a lot of the point. As a systems engineer by education and occupation, I was trying to isolate issues, and then sometimes it would be literally a whiteboard and making bubbles
Yeah.
coming off of them to the different aspects of each topic.
Very cool. Yeah, very cool. Hey, so tell me about yourself, right? So you say you were in the military. Like what's your background?
Okay, so I joined the U.S. Army in 1998. Was pretty successful. Um, was in the Pentagon area for 9/11. Got out in I want to say 2022 to attend the computer engineering program at UCF. Got about
Mhm.
104 hours into that program, dodged 3 hurricanes, came back from those hurricanes to my deployment orders to Iraq. So ended up leaving the engineering program there. Um, Came back to Park University, finished up a computer science degree. Um, Went back into the military for a while. Ended up moving to Washington, D.C. As part of a National Guard unit, got involved in the intelligence community and started working as a contractor there.
Mhm. Mhm.
In 2019, 2018, my wife and I decided that I was spending way too many months deployed in that role. And so we decided to move back to Tennessee, and I started working for an engineering company here, L3. And then in 2018, end of 2018, 2019, I got sick. I started having very severe panic attacks that caused anaphylaxis.
Mhm.
I was pulled unconscious out of my vehicle. Worked with the VA. They attributed it to some of my experiences while in the military. And now there I am at 41 years old, sitting at home disabled, and lost my entire identity, which has always been a public servant. And I don't know if you know this, but when you lose your complete career identity, it is devastating, and you start searching
Oh,
for
yeah.
things to do.
Mhm.
So part of that was writing. So over 6 years, 5.5 years of watching society, going to chat rooms, or watching social media, watching the news, following literally every single story from multiple news media outlets. I just started writing notes, and it ended up with 2,300 pages of MS Word notes. And I looked at it and said, "Hey, maybe people would be interested in this. I feel like this is a good analysis. How am I going to get this into something that people actually want to read?"
Uh-huh.
And I think I cover how I used AI to pare that down. Um, and I'm pretty open about compressing some of those ideas.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
outsource my thought to it. I didn't outsource my writing style to it, but
Uh-huh.
I did use it to compress some things. Um, but I remember going back and forth for 3 hours over one line.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
that was, I put in the book a reference to people who commit a certain crime belonging in wood chippers. And and I went back and forth, and I really had to evaluate the second and third order effects of having a stance like that. But that's what you do as a systems engineer. You look at what assigning the death penalty to one crime can actually push down the line to affecting victims reporting, or even in making a nightmare incentive for the person to commit an even worse crime. And that's just one example.
Yeah,
but
no, there's so much, man. First off, just being in when I read through this and I imagine being inside of your mind, right? I mean, it's definitely a systems engineer type mind. But yeah, there's so much, man. It really does. These books, first off, so you self-publish them, right?
I did. I had to learn the entire, Amazon KDP and everything
totally.
system. But
no, it's just so cool. The last two books that I just wrote a forward or a review of a book from a colleague of mine that he self-published, and then another book who I just got that was self-published. So it's really a way to go. It's so much easier. Don't worry, just get it out there. Anyway, so what motivated you? So you kind of said this, right? What motivated you? What were you seeing when you started taking all these notes about things, about what you were seeing around you?
I mean, I think it's obvious to everyone now, but from maybe the late 2010s to where we are now, there's been this constant divide between, two political ideologies and the country as a whole. And what that meant is there was no compromise. And I feel that every single issue facing the country right now actually has a legitimate and in some cases very simple compromise solution. Be it abortion, immigration, trans rights, the Delaney Hall issue, which I mean, there's all sorts of facets to every one of those issues, but there's compromise available. The problem is, of course, the loudest parties are absolutist and don't want to compromise, but even the middle and the middle section isn't discussing those issues. And the legislative body we have to solve those issues has been non-functional for some time.
Yeah. No, that's actually pretty clear in reading so many of these issues, that you have, that it really is like homelessness. Like here's like this chapter 14. This is in the Accelerating Death of America.
Where I take LA to task.
The problem we choose not to solve. And that's really it, but what you do as the systems person, right? What you do is you go through something like that, and you go step by step as to why it is that we don't solve it, or we think we can't solve it. And like the thing that's really interesting about you, first off, it's really cool when average people, like you're not an author, right? You didn't get trained as an author. You didn't get trained as a writer. You're an average human being, just like the vast majority of us, who's kind of specialized in one area, but you're a thinker. Your mind's really active. And then you said to yourself, okay, well, let me start putting these ideas down and let me see what happens. And then you put it out there. And like, man, I just think that it's so cool when people do that. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, just because it's cool. It's awesome, man. We all have so much power to do that. And some of us have a little more intellect. And maybe it's not intellect, but maybe it's just perseverance, which you clearly have a lot of, man, to put 3 of these books together. But it's really awesome just to see like what the human brain is capable of when we want to open ourselves up to a lot of different perspectives.
Well, and you have to be willing to take take disagreement and take criticism. I mean, I really want, and I think I wrote this in the foreword of the first book, I really want people to challenge me on things. I want them to read the books. I want them to find where they disagree. And then I want them to not, externalize responsibility for the disagreements. I want them to go out and find why they disagree and then come back to me and say, this is why I think you're wrong. This is why I think there's more hope than you think there is. This is why I think your approach to this topic might be off. And the problem is, as a culture, we've gotten away from treating disagreements as opportunities to learn. We treat them as identity attacks because we've internalized so much of, our belief system into our identity instead of saying, you know what, I might be wrong.
Yeah. I love that. Listen, bro, on every page that I've read, at some point on the page, I say like, oh, that's a cool idea. Okay, I agree with that. Oh, I disagree with this over here.
Yeah.
Every single page. But yet my agreement or my disagreement is just based on some tiny little piece that I know that you, if I brought it to your attention, you would be like, oh yeah, no, I can totally see that. Yeah. It's kind of like me in so much of what I do in the classroom. I'll make a point, but just like that, I'll switch and go in the opposite direction because I'm like, well, that was just really a hypothesis anyway. It wasn't it wasn't my final point. I was just imagining,
Well,
So that's pretty cool.
And when people take issues and they look at it from a larger systems perspective, they might actually find that they're not red or blue, that they're, as Jeff and I were talking earlier, varying shades of purple.
Yeah, everything is purple, man.
Yeah.
Everything is purple. Like in reading this, I can't tell. I have no idea. And they're not really strong. Okay, so look, the thing is in each title is Death of America, right? So it's the slow death of America, the accelerating death of America, and the tragic death of America, right? Okay, but those are pretty strong words, and it's really, but the point being, like when I read these 2,000 pages, I don't know where you stand politically. Like I really have no idea. Like
I'll tell you because
on one moment on one page you sound far left and the next moment far right. I don't even know what left and right is. It doesn't matter. It's just you're like a systems guy who's just breaking stuff down and looking at it.
And I hate to be accused of both sidesism, but I'm actually a moderate centrist. I have very liberal social views. I have some justice system conservative views. The problem is in America, we don't have a candidate for us.
Yeah, that's right.
We're stuck in a two-party system.
Most people are like you. Yeah, no, most people are naturally like you, right? Look, here in the United States, we're trained to be thoughtful toward other people, right? We're a friendly nation, right? So historically speaking, we're sort of rooted in that. But we're trained fundamentally to be individualistic oriented, which means we're pretty conservative with how we think about things. It's like, well, I'm going to work hard for what I need to do. So it's going to work best. The system's going to work best if everybody takes responsibility for themselves. And that's how it works. In a communitarian system, it works best when we all rely on other people just as much as we give to other people. That's what it makes, like a really tight connections between people. And then you become, that's where like a Scandinavian or Korean, like kind of a more of a welfare type state. But here it works best. It's like, hey man, don't worry about me. I'll take care of me. But sometimes I can't take care of me and I need, like, you're a disabled vet, right? So it's like, look, man, okay, so now we gotta say like, hey, the Shawn guy, we gotta step in and we gotta do what we need to do. But in a purely individualist society, we would say, hey, dude, whatever, too bad for you, but you're on your own.
Yeah, understand. And it's interesting that you bring up the Nordic countries because they have something. And when I say the death of America, I'm talking about this very specific thing. They have a shared vision of what a path forward for their country looks like.
Yeah.
We don't have that. Yeah. We used to have that, or I'll tell you what, the majority used to have that while suppressing a lot of minority issues. But now we don't have any semblance of a path forward that's shared among the majority. And that's a problem.
Yeah. And shared among everybody. And what's happened is that there's a certain, like, the power interests have simply decided that it's best for them if they divide and conquer in some way. The more you can divide, the more power you have. So it's like, okay. So then but what you do in these books here is you're laying systems out, and with each thing, like this chapter that I just raised, you're like, look, man, here's how you got to look at this from this, and you do it quite well because but it happens very seamlessly. Here's what it looks like from an individualist, like a personal perspective. Here's what it looks like from a community perspective, and here's how we could get through this thing. But what it's going to mean is we have to weave these things together, and we probably won't do that. That's where I don't know if it's realism or pessimism, but I get to the end each of your writing, and I'm not sure if you think it's possible. I tend to think you think it's
so. It's not communism, it's collectivism. It's the idea that we're all in this together, and if we fail, we're going to go down together.
That's right.
I mean, we can disagree about every single political issue you want, but if we finally hit that threshold where where nothing is functioning, where we can't make compromise on anything, and stagnation is across all systems, hyperinflation is going to hit us all.
That's right.
Collapse is going to hit us all.
So like there's this war, this current war, right? So Trump, he comes in power, he rips up the Obama agreement with Iran, right? He says, okay, this is like a bunch of bullshit. And I'm like, dude, first off, I'm sure you have no idea what the agreement is, right? So let's start right there. And the people closest to you have no idea what the agreement is, but you hate Obama, and later, you hate Biden, you hate this whole team, these folks do, so they're just going to rip it up, it's bad, etc., right? By the way, having done deep dives into the agreement, and they worked on this thing for over 8 years with the Iranians, right? Before the Obama administration, the State Department, and really working this thing, it's like endless hours of trust building and working and secret meetings and public meetings. It's like, okay, so we get to the agreement, right? Now, first off, for all the time and really thoughtful and smart people that were part of this on both sides, right? On all sides, because also NATO was involved. It's like, just to say that this is a stupid thing is stupid in itself. So like, come on, man, you don't work on something for so long and just write it off. Like, that's silly. But anyway, so now they come along, they rip it up. Okay, the Iranians just take off and do their thing. And then we decide that, okay, we're going to start bombing Iran, right? Now, I hear people saying like, yeah, okay, I hope you want Trump to fail, right? I'm like, dude, you don't want Trump to fail here. You don't want this war to be a complete disaster, right? Because if it's a complete disaster, you're going to really suffer, if you're an American. Like, what are you talking about? We are in this together. It doesn't mean that you have to say like, hey, I hope we bomb the hell out of the Iranians or whatever, but but if you are thinking about yourself and your position in your nation, you want success, because you're not going to survive without success,
Well, and the Iran war, I've spent a lot of time hitting every different news source, getting the Al Jazeera perspective, getting the RT perspective, all the media in the United States, using some of my background knowledge of geopolitics and national security to evaluate it. And honestly, unless I saw evidence that Iran was actually, producing the uranium to the state where it could be used for a weapon.
Weapons grade, right?
I don't know if this was about that or if this was about trying to capitalize on the unrest happening in Iran at the time,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is incredible economic uncertainty. And
yeah,
he, I think it was bad timing. Um,
yeah. Well,
you can't,
yeah,
I mean, you can say Iran is a regional sponsor of terrorism, but then you
yeah,
can say perhaps Palestine should have had a better avenue for statehood. Maybe we, as a Western society, should have put together $1 billion, $1 trillion incentive packages for Jordan to donate some of the land and
yeah,
built up something like that. The problem is we don't incentivize solutions. Even in this country,
uh,
we don't incentivize solutions. Politicians have no motivation to
yeah,
solve a social issue. You can't fundraise off of a solved political issue. You
yeah,
can't farm
yeah,
outrage off of a solved political issue. What's the point?
yeah. Yeah, nah, dude, it's so interesting to hear, and the way you're talking, like thoughtfully through. I mean, the layers of complexity. I mean, you're making these statements right now, but I will tell you that having read through these three books of yours, the layers of complexity that you bring to these things, it's like it's quite impressive actually for someone who doesn't study the issues, right? Who hasn't studied it.
I don't know
So,
if I wouldn't say I don't study. I spend this chair right here is essentially where I spend 80% of my time.
okay, hang on.
Um,
I'm gonna withdraw that statement. Okay. What I
yeah,
meant to say was you haven't formally studied
fair.
and moved on to like, because people think like, oh, I can't write a book like this because I would have to have, I get 3 volume set like this. I'd have to have a PhD or something like that. It's like, no, you don't. No, no, no. You have to sit in a chair
And
like
understand the
you
issue.
and you gotta just do deep dives day after day. Yeah, 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 yeah. And then you're prepared. And obviously, the result is that you're showing that no, everybody could do this if we want. Just like this Iran, um, what's going on with Iran, right? In the current agreement and whatever it is, and what was in the agreement that the Obama administration came up with.
Has the
But
current one
in
even
order to
been
do that,
signed yet?
yeah, no, no, it had we haven't signed this one yet,
Then
and
we're
it's
not out
going.
of the
Who knows how
conflict
long it'll
stage.
take, dude? It'll be
Yes.
forever, right? And but the idea is like, look, if you want to really understand it, you're gonna need 100 hours, maybe
Yeah,
200 hours, and
yeah.
you're gonna have to dig into places where that are pretty complex, and you're gonna have to read and listen to people you ahead of time think you agree with and ahead of time think you disagree with. And if you don't do that, you're never going to even begin to understand it. But this
And
is
what average
clearly,
American has that time?
no, we don't have the time, dude. You do. That's how you came
Yeah.
up with this, right?
So
Right?
what
This
you
is the
get is politicians with emotional propaganda. On
yeah,
one side, you get politicians with, defense of Israel on this side.
yeah,
But all they're doing is feeding you the messages they need to keep you not talking, not discussing it among
yeah,
each other. All they're
yeah,
doing is trying to keep you spun up. So the next election, you can vote that one of those two colors.
yeah, yeah. That's right. And actually, we already know that 80% of the 90% of the voters, we know where they're going to vote. They're going to just continue to vote red or blue,
Oh,
whatever.
the
And
presidential
any
election now
independents.
comes down to what, two states, three states at this
Yeah, it comes
point?
out, it comes
Yeah.
out to it's a very small number of people,
Or
and
counties,
that's,
even counties. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Hey, let me ask you, what, so go back, I want you to go back like 20 years or so.
Mhm.
Uh, have you always been a person that kind of floated around in the middle of things?
Um, yes. I want to say I wasn't really, I mean, I voted for Obama. Um, I voted for I want to say I voted for Trump the first time, maybe. Um, and then I voted for Biden, and then this last election was one of the toughest.
Oh man, yeah, it's tough.
Because I felt like the Democratic Party robbed itself of a primary
Yeah,
and gave us not perhaps the most ideal candidate to face off against Trump in the election.
yeah, for sure.
Because I actually thought that it was an easily winnable Democratic election. I just don't think that Kamala Harris was the right candidate at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And
The
that's because
economy was doing. Yeah.
I never
Go
could
ahead.
tell what her policies were on very specific things.
Yeah.
So because we're stuck with a two-party system, I had to go in there and vote for one. And I voted for Donald Trump. And I accept that I have contributed to some of the problems I see now. However, I live in Tennessee, which was going to go red anyway. So my vote didn't actually matter in the process. However, I can still accept that I made the active choice to vote that way. Yeah. And I think it's important that if you're going to make an adult decision like that, that you're prepared to accept accountability and don't externalize responsibility for that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting for you to say it like that. I would agree with you. And also, by the way, I really had the idea that I don't know why I was thinking this. I think maybe I don't know what I was thinking, but I had the idea that the second Trump administration would be a lot like the first one. And, they would just kind of stumble along and, whatever. But that wasn't the case, man.
No.
They came in swinging in a whole entirely different way. And yeah.
And it's rough because I have sort of liberal views on immigration policy. We desperately need immigration. I am for fast-tracked immigration of full family units, along with all the money required to support their assimilation into our culture, right? But I also recognize that the visa program is horribly backlogged. And I have a problem with ICE arresting people who are following the process, but are being held up by the bureaucracy within those systems.
Listen, but that's what you would say in here, right? In your writing. Like you always take it back. It's like, look, but maybe this, but the problem with this is you got to look at this other thing over here, and then
second and third order effects. Yeah,
dude, third order effects, and this is your systems engineer mind. You're like, look, you have to look at the entire system to really understand.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, so going back, so you would say growing up, you were always a person that saw lots of different perspectives.
I grew up on military bases. So I did not see the same minority breakdown that most people saw. There was a lot of diversity on military bases. I remember we visited a relative in South Carolina once, and we were driving down the street, and they used the N-word. And I'm like 5 years old, maybe 6 years old. And I said it, and I sang it like, we've been up and down in the N-word town. And I was singing, and my mother turned around and slapped the ever-loving fire out of me. And she was like, we don't ever use that word. And I said, okay. And then she explained to me why.
Yeah.
And it was when my dad retired from the military and we moved to Tennessee, within the first week, I got in a fight because someone used that word. And I was like, you don't use that word. Yeah. But in rural Tennessee, it's a different environment. Or it was in 1993 when we moved. So I want to say, since I was exposed to so much diversity as a child, I came to accept way more viewpoints than, you know, someone who's only sits around people who think like them. I wasn't in an echo chamber, you know, in my developmental years.
And in terms of solving problems, you did you always because I when I read through these books, I feel like you're essentially solving problems.
I was in tag
And
science and in AP classes and stuff, and we
yeah,
always kind of hit stuff like that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
so yeah,
yeah, that's cool.
I've always, and again, when you combine that with a real desire to do public service, it's motivating. So you don't just want to solve problems. You want to solve problems that actually make a difference.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's what's pretty cool. Like you know, you dig into so many things, right? And you remind me of me in the sense that I'm really a generalist, and that so what it requires is that I know a little bit about lots of things, but I got to know enough to know when I'm stepping into something that's going to get me into trouble, or that I'm way out of my league, and like I'm going to make a claim that's really kind of dumb, and so I got to.
So in true support of what I say, that I love when people challenge me, I see John D. EBF here in chat said, if you come across the border illegally, you have no spot in line for citizenship. So I don't disagree with you. A system like immigration needs legal controls, but it also needs to be something that's accessible in a reasonable amount of time. If you're waiting
Yeah,
10 years to get into the country,
yeah,
something's broken. Um,
yeah,
the process isn't working, the vetting's not working. Um, so I
yeah,
understand what you're saying, and I agree. Systems need controls and legality, but don't have broken systems or incredible backlogs and then not identify that also as a problem.
and yeah, and that don't match the sociological reality, because the
Exactly.
sociological reality one is, dude, we got a 2,200-mile border. There's no way you're going to stop people from crossing the border. There's no way you're going to stop starving people from crossing the border. And
Yeah.
you don't really understand this till you're in a place like Haiti or somewhere where you're like, and then I'm sitting in so many different places south of the border or in the Caribbean or different places around the world, and I'm like, look, man, if that was my life, if I was that person
Yeah.
right there, I would do anything I had to do
Exactly.
to make some kind of money. This morning I was listening to a BBC story about all these men on motorcycles in Pakistan that are running fuel back and forth, and they're taking a 12-hour ride on a motorcycle, 12-hour ride to make $10 to $12 in profit by illegally smuggling fuel,
Yeah.
gasoline, fuel across the borders, right? And I'm like, 1,200-mile ride. Dude, these are people who have college degrees. These are people who have professional jobs. They lost their job. They lost this. They lost
But
that.
to
They're going to do whatever
survive,
they got to do. They're going to survive. Yeah. So I'm thinking, like, I'm going to do whatever I got to do to make things from do what I got to do for my family, right? Well, so going back to John's comment, it's like, well, yeah, I get that, but the sociological reality is there are human beings out in the world that are going to do whatever they got to do, and you got to account for
yeah.
that.
And you can put me in that. So I think I covered this in the first book with an example about putting someone in like Afghanistan with no skills and what
Yeah,
they would have
yeah,
to do to survive. And I'll be honest, if you put me and my children and my wife in a terrible country, in a terrible situation, I'm crossing every border I have to. And that's just
yeah, man.
reality.
Yeah, we all are.
Yeah. And you
I'm
have
not
to be
gonna say we
honest
all
with
are, but
yourself. You have to be honest
yeah,
with yourself that put
yeah,
into the same situation, you might make choices that you don't agree with as someone looking from the outside in.
yeah. So then so when you have people that disparage illegal immigrants or people undocumented, people without papers, however you want to say it, right? If we give them names, call them names and disparage them, right? Well, okay, that's fine. I mean, you do that, right? But but what you're missing is really understanding the humanity behind it, because you got to understand the motivations that they're under. And if you don't do that, then you can't create the systems, and you can't create the laws and the rules and everything. You got to create the bureaucracy in order to effectively address what's going on.
And from a
And just
systems
being,
and go ahead.
no, go ahead. Yeah.
In a systems environment, you absolutely do inputs, and you do sources of those inputs and causes of those inputs. And until you understand what that looks like, you can't develop the internal workings of a system. You certainly can't define the outputs of the system until you know everything you're having to process and support. So, yeah.
Dude, hang on. I just want to sit with that. It's a really simple idea, but it's one that's profoundly difficult to grasp and to apply to so many different situations. And we claim to do that, right? Like, hey, we have this undocumented immigration, and we've got and we've got these poor people coming, but nah, man, they're not all poor. First off, let's be clear about that. And a lot of people claim to be poor, and they're not really that poor. They're surviving back home, but in fact, the fact that they're surviving gives them resources to do certain things.
Yeah.
So let's be really.
What is real asylum and what is not?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I was listening to a story the other day of a person that got picked up by ICE, and they got sent back, and they were doing a story about them, and they were talking about how they came and they applied for asylum. And I'm like, well, but hang on. But the way you're talking, it wasn't really asylum. You were poor, and you came across the border, and you said, like, I'm afraid for my life or whatever. But you weren't afraid for your life. You were afraid.
You
of
had
starving.
Economic hardship. So
yeah, that's right. Which I get. Like, I understand, man. And if I were in your shoes, I probably would have made the same decision. But the point being, it's like, wait, hang on, man. Those are different things. And so, yeah, no, that's pretty. It's really no, it's cool. It's uplifting, man. I really appreciate human beings like you who are really wanting to understand as much as possible, and who have the realization that says, hey, I can understand without going to have some kind of formal schooling to study this particular thing, right? I'm studied, I'm learned enough. I'm like, I have the skills, the thinking skills, the research skills. I can do this, and I can apply it to anything.
Well, and let me go back to that topic for a second. Like I said, I support family unit immigration. We desperately need immigration, but I can also recognize that a flood of immigration will collapse the very systems that we say we want. You can't have universal health care and then flood it with 4 times the amount of people all at once. It has to be a measured and controlled process, or standards go down for everyone. And we burn through the few doctors and nurses that we still have remaining, that we are tearing through.
Now it becomes really, you take something else like healthcare. You deal with healthcare, and
I do deal with healthcare.
a fair amount, actually. I mean, you have a personal stake in it too, because you see the things that.
Well, one of the worst things that has ever been done is allowing speculative investment in anything that's a necessity. Because once you do that, you open that necessity to what things like private equity do best, which is maximize profit. And the way they do that is by reducing overhead, reducing quality, taking things down to the bare minimum. And that's not what you want in a basic necessity. You don't want Vanguard, BlackRock buying up all the available housing units, turning them into rentals, and slow dripping the rest into the market to raise prices. You don't want that, because what that does is inflate housing prices everywhere. And And then all of a sudden, nobody can afford a home. And we wonder why. And it's because the body responsible for making regulatory law isn't functioning. And I go back to Congress. I hit Congress a lot because it's their job.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. This is why I think that for me, I enjoy reading your thoughts, because you are a systems person and you got to see that all these things are interconnected. And if you don't see it like that, and if it's like one of these Jenga games. You sort of pull one thing out, it's like, whoa, man, it teeters over here. And, the voters, they demand a response about one thing or another, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, y'all got to understand that if we go that route and do all of that, we're not going to have this over here. It's not, it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, and when we could go on every issue, the tax code, Elon Musk becoming a trillionaire and what that actually means, how we incentivize people with a whole lot of wealth to invest it back into society. I mean, if you want to solve inner city issues and education, we've been throwing money at those systems and they haven't worked. And that's because we have not provided opportunity that really uplifts people in that area to something they can recognize now. But what if we put trade schools in inner cities and started building the next generation of plumbers and welders and carpenters and people that could have value immediately from those skills? Now, all of a sudden, we're developing a base where people can have pride and be successful. I mean, still allow those opportunities for the truly exceptional to go into physics or philosophy or sociology, but still acknowledge that what we've been doing isn't working.
Well, or it's not working as well as it could. Everything is all relative, right? It's nothing, things don't work as well as they could. They don't work as poorly as they could. And not only the cities also, but just rural poverty, man. I have friends who moved to a kind of a more rural area, and they left this town where I am, and they discovered rural healthcare. And and they didn't think about that, we show up at this clinic where this person comes, twice a week from this urban center 3 hours away. And it's like, damn, man,
that is truly urban.
Like that is
I mean, I live in the country, but I have a hospital 5 or 6 miles away.
Yeah. So, no, I think I just read this, I was reading the story about this town that lost its kind of main industry. It closed down, and now they're losing they lost another thing, and now there's a state correctional facility right outside of town where so many people work, and that's closing down. And it's like the whole town. It's a small town in kind of the middle of a rural area, and it's just collapsing in on itself. And
and eventually they'll leave, and the town will die. I mean, that happens.
Or what happened here in Pennsylvania and several towns is suddenly immigrants discover it, and then we have a couple of towns here, man, that Mexican immigrants had completely revitalized the town.
And God bless them for doing the work that some Americans won't. I'm just saying.
Well, I'm just like revitalizing, you know what I mean? And so it's just like what's possible. All that is solid melts into air. That's something that Karl Marx said in Das Kapital. The capital is going to be coming and going constantly, and so the things rise and they fall, they rise and they fall, and that's just kind of that's just going to be how it is. That's how life is. And so there is
capitalism is not evil. Private equity is not evil. Unregulated anything has the potential to become evil.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
and
you got to have there are reasons for regulations, man. I mean, that's the nature of it.
We need immigration, but we need immigration law. and we need to enforce those laws. We need healthcare, but we need good healthcare regulation. We don't need to incentivize insurance companies lowering coverage and healthcare companies increasing prices and saying, "Hey, the government will step in and cover that difference." That just incentivizes bad behavior.
Yeah, no, for sure. And no, at every level, right? So my nephew is worked in sewage treatment. So his area was regulating and modulating big business, or not just, it's mostly big businesses, but everybody who is doing treatment and then has the ability to pour toxic chemicals into the rivers and into the water treatment centers.
Yeah.
So when those things happen, so we pay people to be the police officers of that, right? We have regulations, and if you don't have regulations, then there are going to be people that just saying like, well, you know what? I don't know what to do with this, and it's going to cost me too much, and so I'm just going to pour this toxic sludge.
Second and third order effects of not having effective regulation.
Exactly. And then you have the tragedy of the commons so if I'm an owner here and I'm like, listen, man, am I going to pay $5,000 to get rid of this, or am I just going to pour it into the water system, right? And the tragedy of the commons tells me, it's like, well, how do I know that person, that my competition over there,
isn't doing
over there aren't pouring it into the water system? So they probably are. So therefore I will,
Yeah.
And so, his job was to go around and just make sure, just to be monitoring people, and so those who want to deregulate everything, he wouldn't have been doing that. And then you're going to have this tragic consequence of toxic sludge and toxic chemicals in our water.
It comes back to a shared path forward and a legislative body capable of making the necessary compromises. And a compromise sometimes means nobody's going to be happy, but it's necessary in a society to move forward, to get past that issue.
That's right. That's a nice way to say it. This is what's very clear. This is a thread that runs through your book, right? That these things, it's necessary that we have balance in society, or we can't function together, man. But that's where like the last one, the autopsy, slow death of America, right? The autopsy of a nation that saw it coming, right? It's like, oh shit, we see it, man, but we can't stop it,
Or
I'm laughing because I have to laugh, but it's tragic.
Or we see it, but we continue to reward behavior that's not making anything better. We allow the politicians to emotionally enrage us, instead of saying, okay, you don't like Trump, but what are you doing? Okay, you support Trump, but what are you doing to challenge?
But here's part of the problem, right? You said it yourself. The parties themselves are really running the show. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party, right? So they have invested in, these parties are massive billion-dollar operations, right? And
how do we have the levers of power existing outside of the federal government? The DNC and the RNC. It makes no sense.
Okay. So therefore, for people, we sit around and we know it and we see it, but somehow we can't stop it, because sociologically speaking, there's not a path forward by which we could really just make the kinds of changes. What we need, the only way to do it, is someone who's really an uber populist, which is, when Trump first came on the scene back in 2000. Well, first off, I lived in New Jersey, and I moved to Jersey in 1985, right? So right outside of New York City, because I went to school at Rutgers. And dude, Trump was just a blowhard. God, oh man, always in the tabloids, and just like, I didn't know who this guy was, just who is this guy?
I mean, I try to separate personality from the politics, but he's largely the same person he was.
Dude, okay, so right, exactly. So, But in 26, so I kind of would watch him and just be like, oh my God, this guy, right? But you had to be in New York City at that time in the
To
80s to
really
really
understand it, I get
understand.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, like, ah, God, oh my God. So it's like World Wrestling Mania or whatever, one of those characters, that you
Yeah.
just like, oh God, seriously? Okay, anyway. Um, so no, like Liberace. How about that? That's a good one. Anyway, so so in 2015, 2016, when he was sort of threatening this kind of thing, and I just kind of roll my eyes, but then I started listening, and I'm like, you know what? This guy, first off, I don't think I could stomach him. I couldn't stomach him even just watching from a distance when I lived in New Jersey, but he could be the populist person who could break this system. And he hadn't decided on a party yet. He hadn't said whether he was a Democrat or a Republican. I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, stay in the middle, man. You may be able to make it happen. You may be able to get elected and break these two parties apart. In the end, he went with the Republicans, much to my great disappointment,
Do you want
right?
me to tell you why that was never going to happen? Because unless you're a Republican or unless you're a Democrat,
Yeah,
you're not going to
yeah,
get the funding, you're not going to get the
yeah,
exposure, you're not going to get the endorsement. And I'll give you a perfect example. Bernie Sanders. The DNC
yeah,
destroyed him when he had the audacity to run against Hillary Clinton, right? Because they had
yeah,
determined that she was going to be the selection that year. And
yeah.
Bernie has some good ideas. He has some bad ideas. He has some good ideas. But the way that the own party just went in on his campaign is
Yeah,
truly
yeah,
telling of how much power the RNC and the DNC truly have. And again, I'm not
yeah.
happy that those lovers of power exist outside of a federal structure
Okay, and
because
I'm in
yeah,
agreement with you, but the thing that was different about Trump is I watched him, and even in the 80s, right? I watched him make it to the front page of the tabloids every day when everybody disliked him, right?
yeah,
Everyone thought he was a blowhard. But yet he was able to do it. And yet there was something about him that was endearing, not endearing, that's not the right word, but there was something about him that people were, I don't know, something, right? So I thought he could be that person. It was still going to be a long shot, regardless. It's an absolute long shot. Doesn't matter who it is, but who could break through and be an independent and actually make the move forward. I didn't know who else it could be, but in the end, it wasn't. And so now we have to deal with. We're
we
still stuck in the parties, So it
we are
doesn't.
still stuck in the party system, and and unfortunately, people on the edges increasingly turn that into their identity, and
Yeah,
compromise
yeah,
continues to disappear. And that's in my third book where when I talk about the probable and improbable paths forward. That's that's what I'm basing that on.
yeah,
Is
yeah. That's right.
nothing's
Yeah,
going if we don't break that cycle, we're either going to end up in a nation of yeah, we're going to end up in a
yeah,
nation of freedom. Choose your own flavor of freedom. That's what it was. Choose your own flavor of freedom.
yeah.
You'll cross a state border and your rights will change because the states have taken all these non-enumerated constitutional rights and made rulings on them because Congress refuses to.
Yeah, 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 that's right. Yeah, that's right. Hey, by the way, I never said, these books are available on Amazon. So, Shawn Ray. So, Jeff, you can, and I'll put it in here. When I got the first one, by the way, I had the idea that Shawn Ray was a pseudonym. So,
No, no,
and yeah,
no. I believe that if you're going to say something publicly, own the opinion.
yeah,
And we have a problem with this in Congress. Own the opinion,
yeah,
vote on the issue, be accountable for voting on the issue. So if I say something, I said it. And I want people to know that it's me. And so I want them to challenge me. I'm not going to hide behind a pseudonym. I want them to know I said it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, 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 it's cool. It's really cool. Hang on. I'm gonna I'm gonna put that's the first one. right? Jeff put it up. All right, yeah, there's the first book, and yeah, it's just really again, I don't know, it's uplifting for me, right? Because I have this idea that the night. Look, here's what I did. So you've probably done something similar. When I was in I started my master's program. And mind you, I wasn't a very good student. You mentioned AP classes. I didn't even know what AP classes were. I was not, there was not even, it was nowhere to be part of my reality. But when I started my master's work, and again, I went to the University of Toledo for my master's, and I only went there because I couldn't have gotten in anywhere else. I knew all the professors, and they said, "No, why don't you study here for 2 years?" And I was, I just was really a slow starter in a way. I didn't start thinking in a serious way until I was 20, and then it took me a long time. But when I started my master's degree, I had a professor, and he was really a scholar, like a great. He was a world-renowned scholar. He was at the University of Toledo. He was very famous in the Middle East, but he didn't publish anything in English. He probably published over 50 books, but never published a single thing in English, right? He only published in Arabic. But he was there because he wanted to kind of hide away. Like he was working on a 10-part, his life work. It was 10 parts, right? And he didn't want to be at some big university where people would bother him and he'd have to go give talks and this, that kind of thing. Like his only reason to be alive was to finish this life work. So he worked for 2 quarters of the year. So for like 20 weeks out of the year at the university teaching, and just 2 days a week even. So really it was 40 days a week he was teaching. And the rest of the time he was writing. And then, in the winter, he would spend 2 months in the Middle East writing, and he was from Lebanon. Anyway, he told me, he said, "Look, man, here's what you need to do. You need to pick a newspaper. It doesn't matter what it is, but pick one of the big ones, like Christian Science Monitor, which back in the day was pretty good newspaper, really good international news. Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, doesn't really matter which one it is, but read it every single day. And it doesn't have to be cover to cover. Well, you can't, because you would need 5 to 6 hours to read cover to cover. But read it every single day. Begin to have an understanding of the world. And when you have issues that you don't know anything about, just read the article about it. And then okay, that's good. You won't understand a lot, but then come back next week and read another one about that topic, whatever it is, healthcare, read it every single day. Don't read the opinion stuff, because you don't care about other people's opinions. You just really want to understand what's out there.
What's happening. Yeah.
What's happening. And after years of doing that, and probably 6 or 7 years, I was able to see that when I picked up an edition of the newspaper, it was the same thing that I read 6 years earlier. You know what I mean? Like, things don't change. I knew what was going on in Indonesia. I knew what was going on in South Africa. I knew what was happening in Laos. I knew what was happening in Mongolia. It didn't matter, right? I had an understanding. And then I had an understanding of the basic issues. And I'm like, okay, all right. And that put a framework around my thinking. And on top of that was my sociological study, but it really was just doing the news every single day. And I feel like you must have done something like that.
That's what I do every day.
Yeah.
My day starts, and I shouldn't, because my psychologist at the VA actually recommends against it, because since I have a background in international affairs from my contracting work, sometimes I'll come across a story and I'll be like, I actually know the real truth behind some of what they're saying, and that can lead me down bad roads to a panic attack. But I can't. I can't go a day without going to Al Jazeera and getting their view of an issue, and then going to RT and saying, okay, what's the Russian spin on this issue? And then CNN and Fox. Cool. And because if I don't, because the truth is somewhere in the middle, so I got to have I have to have this all-encompassing. I have to have all these notes to go down and then go through them all and saying, okay, that's probably BS. Okay, that sounds about right, but I'll have to check it. I'll have to go verify it. And that's how I
Dude, for
spend most of
example,
my mornings.
so you would go, so I do this thing like recently, I've been really interested in China for many years, but in the past number of months, I've been doing deep dives into China. And I'll
Okay.
go into Chinese YouTube and I'll find places where someone's given a talk and there's English on top of it, right? Someone will put English subtitles in or something like that. And then I'm listening to some Chinese scholar or some Chinese politician speaking to people from a Chinese perspective and then speaking about the United States. And I'm like, oh my God, this is gold, right? Because
Yeah.
like, how can I understand what's going on? You got over 1 billion people in China, right?
Yeah.
Almost billion, 1.4 billion. Like, how am I not going to listen to what a Chinese scholar or a Chinese politician thinks about the US, right? It's I just it's so much fun. Yeah, for me. So you must do things. So that's you. You're doing the same damn thing.
I remember spending 2 hours one night with the Chinese AI platform. Is it Deep something? Deep Sync? Deep?
Yeah,
In
deep
any
seek.
case,
Yeah.
yeah. So what I would do is I'd write explain Tiananmen Square, and it would start writing it out, but halfway through it would stop and say this is not a topic we can discuss. So I would do it again, and then I
Oh,
would screenshot. And I kept doing that for all kinds of issues that I knew China perhaps didn't want available to its user
yeah.
base. And
Yeah.
and that's when I decided that, you know what, I think each one of these books needs a chapter on AI, on alignments,
Yeah. Yeah,
on,
that's cool.
on guardrails, on
Yeah, that's
how
cool.
it's going to interact with society. But I'm not going to write those. And that's why the AI chapters are specifically written by AI, that one chapter.
Oh, yeah, that's very
And I
cool.
call
Yeah,
that out. I
that's
say,
very
listen,
cool.
this is what I want you to talk about. Try to put it in my conversational style. I am not going to edit anything you say. Go.
Yeah.
Talk about misalignment. Talk about guardrails and why they're important or how they can be abused. Talk
Yeah,
about
that's
those
cool.
things. And because I wanted a better understanding of it. And
So,
if
okay.
what it produced gave me an understanding, I'll share that with everybody else. Yeah.
All right. Okay, I got you. So do you do, so I do these other strange things. Like I'll go to the largest newspaper in Tangiers, right?
Yeah.
And I'll look for an op-ed piece that some scholar writes about who knows about NATO or about something
Yeah.
like that. And I want to read perspectives of people in other countries. And it's so and like I listen to music. I'll put on like a radio station from Manila in the Philippines, and that'll be what's on one day while I'm in my room studying. It's just like it's just this radio station, and they're speaking in English and Tagalog, and like I don't understand some stuff when they launch into Tagalog, but that's what makes it really interesting, right? And
Yeah.
then I'll suddenly be reading a newspaper from the Philippines. I'm like, all right, what do you got to say? What do you got to say about things? What are you thinking about China?
Yeah.
You know?
I bet you find a
And
lot of common denominators in society too. People trying to live their
dude,
lives, get by, survive, feed their kids,
yeah,
send them to
yeah,
school. Um,
yeah, yeah,
we're talking about in America in my books, but it's the same is true on a global stage.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It really is. Yeah, it really is. No, it's very cool. Yeah, it's good to hear. It's good to hear. For me, I mean, I do you do a lot with the BBC? Do you find yourself
I
interested
I
in
definitely read the I go to the BBC and read their articles too in the morning. That's one of my sites that I hit. Um, they're having a very interesting time in the UK right now.
Yeah, totally, man. Yeah,
um,
totally. Yeah.
I believe they're learning a lesson about what sometimes uncontrolled immigration can look like. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I think they'll get through it. I saw a question here from somebody. You have to consider the source, but have you seen the recent research about bias in AI with regard to religion? That's funny because I just did a 5 or 6 hour back and forth about the systems container problem that both religion and atheism share. How, in order for something to exist, there has to be an environment in which produces the conditions for it to exist. And I wrote up a whole paper on that. So I think I'm interested to see what the religious bias around AI is. Sorry, I just wanted to engage with somebody in the.
Wait, do you mean you did a back and forth with AI?
With AI,
Yeah,
because I mean,
I
that's
do
who
it.
I got here in the house most times. But
No,
so,
dude,
and what
I
I'll
do
do is,
that. It's cool. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
hey, here are all my conclusions. Now let's challenge it. Okay, here are your challenges. Now let's resolve these one at a time, and we'll talk about individual aspects of it. And so in that one paper, we came to the fact that we currently don't have the understanding of physics enough to solve the container ship problem, or because we're not talking about a vacuum, we're talking about a true void. What has to exist in order to provide the conditions that something like the universe can function? And I'll do a paper every week on different things. Again, I was telling Jeff, I wrote something to NASA about a real example about how we could defeat a delta V acceleration, simply by moving our launch platform initially and using ringed sub boosters from low Earth orbit. And so like I said, I try. Sometimes I'll go to world news, but sometimes I'll see a technology argument. Sometimes I'll see a religious argument, and I engage kind of whatever grabs my attention.
Yeah. And listen, man, AI can be so useful for that, right?
But it's a tool, right? You should never externalize your responsibility.
But what isn't a tool, man? I mean, where am I going to turn to that's less of a tool? Like, I mean, this less problematic. I mean, where am I going to go? And so we can sit on the outside and say like, oh, there's bias in AI about X, Y, or Z. I'm like, hey, man, I do some explorations in AI about, well, I just did one on my foot. I have swelling on the top of my left foot, and it's on the top. And I'm like, okay, listen, man. My wife said, hey, just jump into AI. Go to Gemini or ChatGPT, but I pay for a higher level in Gemini. So I'm like, all right, let me do. And then I ask, and then I say, okay, well, listen, but hang on a second. I'm 65, and I start throwing a few things else, and it's like, oh, okay, all right, well, it's good that you said that. Well, in that case, da da da. And I said, okay, well, let me add this in, and then I got such intense communication back about what's going on with my foot. And I thought, hey, I can go to a podiatrist, or I can go to my primary care person
and speak about it intelligently now.
Why would I do that? Because I've been talking to these MDs, and they're like, increasingly they're leaving a meeting with someone and they're on their phone going into AI, going like, all right, hang on a second, man, let me look this up. Because dude, it's unbelievable, right? And so I have same thing with my hearing. And I went into this long exploration about what might be happening with my hearing, and I'm like, it was unbelievable, right? And I'm not going to get that from my local audiologist, right?
I mean, so what's the difference between a physician going to AI, typing in a list of symptoms, or them going back to their office, pulling 18 books off the shelf and flipping through the pages? There's not.
No, the AI piece is faster and it's more efficient, right?
Exactly. And when the average American doctor is spending 70% of their time on paperwork, and there's 10 administrators for every one doctor.
And the reason they say like, hey, try this pill is because the pharmaceutical rep visited their office a couple weeks earlier, and they
Yeah.
sell them on these pills, and they're like, all right, you say it works, but they have no idea, man.
No.
They haven't done the research. So, well, I have to research that pill. Listen, man, my wife studied advanced theoretical statistics, okay? For one of us to understand the research that goes into the decision to decide that this particular drug, this pill, is acceptable for this ailment, whatever it is, you really have to have almost a PhD in statistics to understand what that means. And it's like
Yeah.
you're gonna get that, and like to dig through and see how they decided that this pill had efficacy. It's just
Yeah.
like silliness. I went into
But
the Iran thing. I just a little bit ago, I was thinking, wait, hang on a second, let me make sure. And I started asking questions about Iran and different, just going back in time. Man, it was just walking me through stuff and linking, and then I click on the link. I'm like, wait, hang on, where'd you get that information? And I click on that, and it takes me over here and here and here. I'm like, it's brilliant, man.
yeah,
Really,
and it's incredibly useful. But again, there is misalignment, there is guardrails, and there is a danger. Um, and since I talk with it so much, pretty much on a daily basis,
yeah.
I've been able to generate active hallucinations in different chat GPT models.
Ah,
And so,
yeah,
so sometimes what it will do, and I imagine, I'm not trying to single out chat GPT. I imagine that this is in every AI model. Uh,
yeah.
but what I'll do is I'll say, and I'll bring up some a topic that's everybody disagrees on. I'll say Charlie Kirk died in September 2025, and it'll go, I have no evidence that Charlie Kirk died in 2025, and I'll say,
Oh,
no, yeah, well, because its available initial database of information is delayed by X amount of time. So I'll say,
uh,
go search and find the actual information on his death, and it'll come back and say, okay, I misspoke. He died on September, whatever it was, September 10th or whatever, 2025. Then my next question to Chat GPT will be, Charlie Kirk died in September 25, and it'll go, that's not true. I have no record that he died in 2025. And that's because there is no continuation of truth, even between prompts. And sometimes it'll
yeah,
revert to
yeah,
its stored data. So when you're working with a tool like that, you have to be extremely careful that
yeah.
it's carrying on things that you've already established in your conversation. Otherwise, you're going to get misinformation. And
Yeah,
I'm
well,
using, yeah.
that's so interesting. Yeah. Well, you know what? Though the more we think about things, like I feel like I'm at a place now with my experience and so on that I can I'm going to get misinformation everywhere. It doesn't matter.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
apps
it
every
doesn't
day,
matter.
every day. I
So
imagine we all hear
yeah.
at least one piece of just blatant misinformation a day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, dude, it just becomes like something. I see some statistics, something. I'm just like, okay, hang on. There's no way that's true. There's just no way, right? And but like, okay, but the more careful I am, the more willing. Hang on. The less willing I am to accept extremes, one way or the other.
Yeah,
And the more willing I am to realize that the vast majority of truth is somewhere in this middle, near the fulcrum, right? Because that's the bell curve, right? So it's near the fulcrum.
hmm
Then the easier it is for me to assess and sort through any information and realize and get a sense of whether I trust it or distrust it or whatever.
what,
So
excluding the extremes and meeting somewhere in the middle is an effective strategy? That's crazy. Where have I heard that
I know.
before?
Can you believe that? Yeah, I know. That's all right. Well, okay, going back to your books though, the cool thing about it, which I congratulate you on, as I read, uh, as I the dug into reading them, I really didn't know where you stood politically, right? Like I didn't know. And then, but then as I got further along, I realized, okay, you're right here. We're kind of where I am. You're like kind of pulling things from all over, and that's like pretty, yeah, that's pretty cool. I do appreciate that.
I mean, and I'll call out some of my beliefs. For example, I talk about trans rights, and I'm like, listen, I completely support LGBT community, marriage, be happy, do what you want, private citizens living private lives. And then I say, I really want to support trans rights, but there's places where we got to come together and talk about things first. Your first journey to being a woman can't be, invalidating women's concerns about having a male in their spaces. We have to talk about this. We have to find the middle ground. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
we have to find the middle ground.
Yeah.
And because like I said, I really want to support someone, being happy, living their own, who they feel they are. At the same time, I can't support compulsion to do things. If you ask me to use your pronouns, I will use them 100% of the time. If you try to compel me with force, and any kind of punishment for not doing so can be considered force. If you try to do that, I'm going to resist. But if you ask me 100% of the time, I'll call you whatever you want. Just out of general respect.
And I think you would argue that most people would make a very similar argument.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think, but now that the issue became politicized, right, then you're going to have a higher number of people that are going to be like, no, I'm never going to do it just because I'm going to put my foot down and be like, fuck it, And
sometimes you got to push absolutists to the side and compromise.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. That's the problem with politicizing things and becoming aggressively even, right, in the way that we do. Yeah.
So somebody asked a question, and I want to make sure. It says, Sam, he voted for Trump, and Shawn hasn't been asked about his opinion of Trump's performance.
No, I already know your opinion of Trump's performance, but go ahead.
It's been impulsive. It's been poorly thought out in some instances. I would have to go line by line through each item and talk really about how it's impacted our global the perception of the U.S. on a global stage, how it's affected the economy, how it's impacted the poor, how it's made some parts of our country hostile to immigration. So I would say, on a scale of 1 to 10, 3 or 4. But again, the president is just the president. And when I say that, I mean, there exists this legislative body specifically built to challenge the power of the executive branch. And right now, we're red versus blue, and it should be legislative branch versus the executive branch. That's what we should be back to, and we're not there.
Dude, that's actually a really cool, thoughtful response, actually. That's a good
Zeisendorf, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
I want to make sure that you get what you want out of me.
Yeah. And I will say the poorest performance, what gets a 1 is the congressional branch, the legislative branch, man, and the judicial branch. They get a 1, right? Trump actually, and ironically, for him doing what he wants to do, he gets a 10 because he's managed to marginalize all of them and do what he wants to do. His actual,
as far as him doing his platform, I mean, what are you going to say?
But they've really fallen over themselves. Yeah, but the war, look, I was just reading, there's this article just came out in Foreign Policy, and Foreign Policy is probably the premier foreign policy magazine. It's not a journal. I mean, it is a journal, and people in the foreign policy, who are policy geeks, they read it. But there's an article just came out about this war, and that we basically not only did we lose the war, but the loss is far worse. It's one guy. He's this this Nudnik guy over at Georgetown University in Doha in Qatar, right? But he wrote this article, and I read it, and it's actually fairly thoughtful, quite thoughtful actually. And it is not only the damages are far worse than the loss in our loss in Vietnam. Okay, and he walks through how this Iran war is just a complete, absolute, and utter disaster in 1,000 ways.
Absolutely. We have not felt yet the impacts of what are going to hit the economy because of this conflict.
Oh, dude, it's the economy. It's uplifted the
Yeah.
Chinese in a way. It's uplifted the Iranians. The
Oh yeah.
Iranians have discovered all sorts of things. It's like it's
Zeisendorf.
destabilized them. Yeah.
I don't mean to laugh. His platform does have a lot of ridiculous items. That was my laughter. No, the impacts it has on actual people is not a laughing matter. So I apologize.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. No, it's really very deep, so many pieces deeply disturbing. Now, at the same time, right, what I say is, well, you got to break some things to rebuild them, right? And
Yeah.
so there are some things that are getting broken right now, that some things that we're not going to be able, they're going to get rebuilt, and they're going to get rebuilt in a way that's very troubling and problematic for the future of the United States, right? But there are other things that are going to get rebuilt that are going to be positive. And I don't know what they are, because I like this current war, for example. Maybe what's going to happen is things are going to open up in some kind of way. It's like, man, I never would have predicted that happened, right? But it did, and here we are. And but so I always remain optimistic in that way from a systems perspective. Like
Yeah.
systems can rebalance themselves in a way that's very, very unpredictable. Yeah.
And I really hope that's what happens, Dr. Richards. I really do hope the systems do find a way to balance the extremes, the extreme dysfunction that we're currently experiencing.
Yeah.
I don't think we can. And well, it's not that I don't think we can. I don't think we can fast enough to avoid some type of severe economic downturn, some kind of separation of freedoms by states simply ignoring or choosing to legislate solutions to issues that Congress won't act on. I think we're probably going to see some more division before voters start requiring their politicians to compromise, not just give them a platform full of things that they agree with.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And we may not get there, because we may have a level of division. We may go off a cliff in terms of our division and not be able to get back. And that frightens
that's
me,
my concern.
to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have too many. There are too many guns. There's just too many.
Well, but I don't think we're headed towards a violent civil war, because honestly, I think the silent majority in the middle is not interested in blowing up the country or in killing a bunch of people. Yeah.
But I watched these so-called celebrations after the Knicks won in 3 different nights in New York, right? And I think, like, there are a lot of people, the crowd mentality, there are a lot of people that jumped on board here who wouldn't do this ordinarily. Like, they went, that's the nature of crowds, the crowd, this French theorist Le Bon talked about crowds. It takes over people. And people do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do.
That's fair. I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that may just be the kind of thing. It's like, well, I wouldn't normally, get my gun and go out and do whatever, or join them.
But how long is that sustainable, or is it a self-perpetuating situation we're talking about? Yeah, that makes sense.
But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And it's just unfortunate, at every level. Yeah, like this war. I mean, I can make up in my mind ways in which in 10 and 20 years this war in Iran will have led to certain positive things that are really important for where we're at in 10 or 20 years. I can make them up in my mind, right? But logically, I can follow through with a very thoughtful sociological analysis, all the problems that are going to happen. Like, I don't have to make them up. I can see it right there, right? And it's like, oh man, they're much easier to argue. And it's not because I'm following people, like I'm following the contrarians as much as possible.
No, this war is going to result in exactly the opposite of what any peace-loving person truly wanted to see in the Middle East. It's going to isolate Israel further. It's going to cause the Palestinians further hardship because Iran is not going to stop funding Hamas. They're not going to stop funding the Houthis. They're not going to stop funding Hezbollah. They're going to continue doing that. And the idea that we could simply go in and topple the regime without removing both the regime and the entire IRGC was just a strategic error. I mean, you can't do half measures when you're trying to do things like that. So what we did is essentially just create a much larger problem than already existed.
Yeah, completely. I mean, that's how I see it. Now I've not spoken with I've not seen a really, really smart person who makes the opposite argument. It seems like everybody I'm reading, and I'm trying to go like find that argument, but that would show me that that's not the case. But it just seems like, oh man, yeah, it just sucks. And that's it's just, yeah. Anyway, all right, listen, we're at 4:30, so we should probably.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take up.
Hey, I just want to be really clear. Jeff, if you could put back in the chat these Shawn has done something that I think it's really awesome, and it'd be really fun if more people did it. But just kudos to you, man, to take the amount of time that you did to sort through and find the positive and the negative and do this systems analysis of so many social problems and economic problems in the U.S. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really love the chance to discuss these kind of things with a real person.
Right.
And get true, human, disagreement or contrary views instead of having to direct ChatGPT to argue with everything that I say.
Yeah, I know. I do that too sometimes. I'm like, hey, tell me why I'm wrong about this. Right?
Yeah.
and I get some brilliant responses that cause me to say, like, oh man,
I hadn't considered that. Back to second, third order effects.
Yeah, man. And that shows you what really, in a certain sense, what it takes. Yeah. And how much we're just, my fear is we're not going to evolve much beyond where we're at right now.
I think
so then I can go, this is maybe the Elon Musk thing. It's okay, take your trillion or whatever it is, go invest in space, man. Like, let's go. Like, I made an argument the other day that for us to really invest and it's going to happen. First off, man, it's not just because I'm a Trekkie and I've been watching Star Trek since I was a kid, but
the next generation forever.
Listen, it's going to happen. We're going to be out exploring the universe, and there are going to be these moments in time when humanity, we don't solve the problems here. Instead, we take all these resources and we invest them into leaving the planet. And that's just what it is. Like, we're not going to deal with hunger over here. Instead, we're going to build these rockets and we're going to go do that. Okay, that's life, man. And so, and it may be that this is just one of those moments. And as much as I really personally dislike the guy, Musk might just be this dude. That's like, look back, and he's a guy that just jumped us into a new place. So, whatever.
I wouldn't say that I'm a fan. I appreciate the vision. I didn't like that he got involved in government so much because there was no authority ever granted for that. I thought that was really weird.
But that wasn't him. That was Trump, and that was Congress not putting their foot down to say, like,
Where's Congress at? We've already established they're gone.
yeah, they're gone. No. For me, it was Trump when he had this news conference and he was all giddy about the fact that he just cut 200,000 jobs from, and I'm like, motherfucker, those are 200,000 families, man. Like,
Yeah,
who are
no.
you talking? What a dickweed.
Yay,
And
200,000
like,
people that need some kind of social safety net now because you made an or impulsive decision. That's great.
yeah, it's
Why
just
would you do
stupid. And then
that?
the other stupid people that were at the press conference, they were wherever, it was some kind of rally. The people that were cheering, like, yeah, I'm like, dude, this is where I lose my faith in humanity.
Yeah.
It's like I'm gonna cheer this guy who just like, oh, come on, man. So anyway, that's like what can I say? Oh, I don't know. All right, bro, listen, man. We can go on forever. Really
We
good.
could.
Good talking to you. We'll definitely stay in touch. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Appreciate your analysis and your thoughtfulness. So thanks for the books and
Okay.
good luck. Let me know if you need anything.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Richards.
All right, man. All right, I'll see you, bro.